Hey everyone, thanks for listening to the GTM News Show. I have Kyle Racki here. Thanks for joining me today, Kyle.
Thanks for having me, Taylor.
Looking forward to it. So today, Kyle is the CEO and co-founder of Proposify, and I actually came across his podcast on LinkedIn, and he was talking about ChatGPT and how he was able to create a roadmap, 12 months worth of content through ChatGPT. So we're going to talk about all about ChatGPT, Kyle's personal experience with it today, and then also kind of the overall, what does this mean for B2B teams moving forward, go-to-market teams moving forward? How can folks leverage these tools, but then also position their careers long-term as well? So let's just jump right into it, Kyle. Love to hear if you want to give people kind of high-level overview of what you shared in your podcast around using ChatGPT to create that 12 months worth of content.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, like a lot of us, I jumped on the bandwagon pretty quickly with ChatGPT when it was, I think back in November, it first launched and was getting everybody pretty excited about it. So, I was talking to my friend about like different use cases and how he was using it. My friend Bill Wilson, who does Price to Profit, he's like, he's using it to help him write. He's been using Jasper AI for a long time. So I've always been a little bit skeptical of AI writing, I guess. But when I started to use ChatGPT, I really saw the potential for not necessarily how it would write for you, but how it would help with idea generation. And so it kind of happened around the time during the holidays. I was thinking about content for next year, for this year, and I had also bought a course by Justin Welsh on building your LinkedIn audience. And so he had a lot of really good ideas and frameworks for content planning and strategy on LinkedIn. And I kind of combined these things into basically I took the time that I had between Christmas and New Year's and really dedicated say 3 or 4 hours to this, where I was basically what could I use ChatGPT to essentially generate a year's worth of content ideas? And the reason I picked a year was because, everybody I think starts with good intentions around this time of year, just like they do with exercise, oh, I'm going to go to the gym every day, but then life gets in the way. And it's kind of the same thing with content. People go, oh, I want to consistently post to LinkedIn or my blog or my podcast or what have you. And then it becomes, oh, I got too busy, life got in the way. But a lot of times when you really sit down, even if you schedule blocks to sit down and write content or create content, a lot of times you run up against I don't feel inspired by anything, or I don't know what to write about. So that can be the big blocker. As you got to come up with something, and you might even have a brief list of ideas, but more often than not, people post in the moment when something comes to mind or when they feel inspired by something. So it's always, it's not very intentional. It's always driven by how inspired do I feel, which you can't control. You can't control when you feel inspired, right? So basically what I did was I was looking at Justin Welsh's framework for content. And then I was like, what if we let ChatGPT assist us here? So I can break that down if you want, me to go step by step with that process.
Let's do it.
Cool. So Justin Welsh's course is excellent, recommended to people. He had a really cool way to think about that idea of how do you generate a bunch of ideas really quickly? And so so basically do this. Think about who your target audience is. So assuming people listening to this kind of have an idea of what is their target audience? Who do they go after? What is their niche? And then think about, okay, if your niche is, parents or sales leaders or engineers, what have you, that sort of ICP audience. Okay, what are the topics that you like to write about that audience would care about? So for me, I'm interested in sort of my side project, my own personal content in helping other founders get to product market fit and, build a SaaS product. Because that's what I know, that's what I've done, then that's what I like to write about, and that's sort of the group I could help. So you sit down and you write down, okay, what are all the different topics that I've written about over the years on it? Okay, well, there's growth, there's leadership, there's, customer interviews. Like there's a whole bunch of things. So you come up with like, say, 30 to 40 high level topics that you like to write about. And then what you do is you place it in a spreadsheet, and across the columns, you would put different structures of content. So this is what I got from Justin Welsh was, basically 8 or 9 different ways to structure content. So those ideas are like analytical content where you analyze something and break it down. It could be, contrarian content where you're coming up with like a position that's maybe the polar opposite of what traditional wisdom is or what most people are saying. You can do a listicle, like, 5 ways to blah, blah, blah. So there's basically 8 different topic structures. And his idea was like, if you just kind of mix and match. So if like, I'm going to do a piece of content on, management and make it contrarian, then that would sort of be like your quick idea. And then when you get down to writing it, you've got something to work with it. So that isn't anything new that I came up with. That was what I learned from Justin's course. But then I thought, well, what if ChatGPT assisted? So basically the idea was I wanted to come up with, one in-depth article or newsletter a week. And I didn't want to like face choice paralysis when I sat down to write it. So this is the problem with a big topic list. So if you've got 100 topics that you can talk about and you sit down to write, well, which one do I pick?
I've been there.
Yeah. Instead, what I did was I very randomly just put the topic name and the content structure as the name of a Google Doc. And then I just copied it 100 times and I just swapped it out. So basically like my January folder has 4 articles in it. The Google Docs are already made, and it's management, contrarian style, customer interviews, listicle, what have you. Right. So your content structure with your topic. Then what I did was I opened up every one, and this does take a while. Like it takes a couple hours for sure.
Okay.
You open it up, you go into ChatGPT, you take your topic idea and you say, ChatGPT, write me 5 headlines that are about management from a contrarian style. So ChatGPT will go and write however many headlines you tell it to. And at least 1 or 2 of those will be pretty good. You'll be like, oh man, with a few tweaks, that would be really good. So what I did was I pasted that into the Google Doc for that specific article. Then I took kind of like highlighted or bolded the headline idea that I thought was probably the best. And then I took that idea, went back to ChatGPT and said, now write me an article about this. And so it would go and it would sort of write you an article. And then I didn't care what was in it. I just took it and I pasted it into the document. And that was it. I did that for basically like, say, 52 articles.
Okay.
And with 2 hours and a lot of copy paste and a lot of coffee, like you can get through that pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And that now what it is like, yeah, the content isn't done and it's not even necessarily good content. But now I don't have to think about it. Every Friday I write my newsletter for my, this new like Saturday morning SaaS newsletter that I'm writing for folks who are interested in it. Friday, I just open the Google Doc that's next on the list. And it's already got the headline and it's already got the meat of the content. And sometimes I'll pivot to something that's like kind of different, but it was sparked by that idea. But the point is that I don't really have to think about what I'm writing. I go, okay, I need to talk about this. Here's some background information to give me a little bit of context to get me in the mood a bit, to inspire.
I love it.
That's it.
Super cool. So if I'm hearing correctly, it sounds like you had almost a topic category that you outlined for the 52 weeks of the year. And then you had a kind of a framework for like what you wanted to talk about, but then ChatGPT did 2 things. First, to help you create a title. So, and that was kind of like, that's kind of drilling down into the specific idea. Yeah. You gave ChatGPT just a category. Is that right? Just like, and then you came up with the actual like specific topic that you're going to talk about. Is that right?
I'll give an example. So I'm going to open up my drive here, go to where I've got this stuff stored, and I'll just jump ahead to May. So I've got 4 articles in May. One is called Achieving PM Fit, Essential Analytics to Track. So that I probably took that headline from ChatGPT. Another one is, SaaS that makes it versus the 99 that don't. Another one is save time and resources, validate your ideas without writing code. So these are just, basically, I've just replaced these names with the ideas that ChatGPT gave me. I'll look into this last one, save time and resources, validate your ideas without writing code. So ChatGPT gave me 5 different headline ideas. No code validation, quick and easy ways to test your ideas. The no code way to test your ideas, simple and effective validation. So the one that I picked was number 2. That's what I put at the top of it. And then there's basically like a 5 bullet point article that ChatGPT wrote me. And again, I'm probably not going to use any of it. It's really just a starting point to jump off and be like, oh no, that's wrong. It's actually this. But you're just filling in the blanks at that point.
Got it. I love it. Yeah. And I think even what you said earlier, I can resonate with consistency with creating content, and then also inspiration. I think that's every writer's or artist plight is doing it consistently, but then also having new inspiration. And that's cool that you kind of figured out ChatGPT to kind of give you almost the building blocks for creating. And then it did sound like you did go through a planning process that then helped you in combination with getting that consistency down. I'm curious, you mentioned you were skeptical historically using AI tools like ChatGPT. What was the aha moment? It sounds like there's a couple different things that helped you with, but what was that real aha moment? You're like, oh my gosh, this can save me a lot of time.
I think it came from just playing with it and seeing what it could do. And I probably still haven't scratched the surface of what it can do. Like, my friend Bill showed me how you can reference like things that ChatGPT wrote you earlier in the conversation without having to retype it. I didn't know that, right? Like, it's basically getting it to build on top of itself. So like, there's so many kind of, if you think about it just as essentially like a slightly smarter search engine, you realize like that's pretty limiting, but there's a lot that it does that goes beyond that. I think for me though, like the skepticism comes from, can a robot really write an engaging article? I don't think it's there yet. I think it probably will get there, but when I think about the articles that I like to read, the essays, the blog posts, they come from a real like human perspective. They're not always grammatically correct. They sound conversational, and they come from deep experience and nuance. And I don't think that AI has that yet. So anything that it generates generally reads mostly like AI content. You're like, yeah, it's pretty good. It's about as good as anything that's on like, big websites like, entrepreneur.com or Business Insider. Like they're fine. They're just generic. Yeah.
Yeah. You brought up a good point as far as and actually I was at lunch with some friends yesterday, my wife and I, and we were talking about ChatGPT and it was interesting because I think the conclusion, one of my friends brought up this really great point where she was like, it's almost that AI generated content is too perfect. And it doesn't have the humanness of it. And I wonder, and I think there's part of that is actually like the grammar and the structure of it. It's almost like too cookie cutter, but then also just the creativity of humans and just, how we have our unique imprint on things. And I don't want to get too philosophical here, but I think there's a lot to be said for that input that the humans give. And I actually want to read this quote I just saw yesterday by the co-founder of HubSpot, Dharmesh Shah. And he has such a great way of phrasing what we're talking about right now. And he said, quote, advanced prompt engineering in ChatGPT is a mix of learning a new language and teaching a new language. You learn how to describe what you want. And then you teach it how best to understand what you're asking. And first, there's this whole new world of prompt engineering, which is what we're talking about, right? Which is how do we ask the right questions? And I'd be curious your thoughts on any other things you've learned about ChatGPT. You mentioned, hey, it can look at historical conversations you've had and pull that. What other things have you learned about asking the right questions so then it can help you create the right content? Any thoughts there?
Well, I where I think would be interesting to go is one of your points that you just mentioned that was in the quote from Dharmesh, which was around teaching the AI. And I think that right now the builders of ChatGPT and other AI writing tools have a problem, which is that invariably when you use these things, you exit their environment. So I'm sure like the makers of Jasper AI, I've kind of played around with that around the same time as ChatGPT. And they have like more of a robust software for like actually writing articles within there. But more often than not, most of us are going to copy what the AI creates and move it to Google Docs or Word, or directly to like LinkedIn or some sort of social platform. And I think the challenge that these developers are going to have with AI writing tools is that the feedback loop gets cut off. So ChatGPT can generate ideas, and out of those ideas, I can take one and run with it and hone it and refine it. But the tool has no idea which one that is.
Interesting. Yeah, I haven't thought about that. As far as the positive feedback loop of like what worked, what didn't work, what did you? I mean, there is some sort of, you can like it or not like it and give feedback to the program. But that's super interesting. Any other thoughts on Dharmesh's quote?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's insightful, but that is kind of where, again, that skepticism comes in, where I go, are we actually teaching it? We're teaching it based on the questions we asked, for sure. But I think that the power, so if we want AI to go from, and maybe we don't want, but I assume the makers of AI want it to get smarter and smarter. It's definitely a topic that's polarizing and some people are quite creeped out by for good reason. But if we actually want to get to the point where AI is getting so good that you can't tell it's a robot and that it has that fingerprint of human behind it and it feels like a human wrote it and it has the nuance and if we want that, we have to teach it what that looks like based on which elements it's writing and how we use it and which things we choose to ignore and which things we choose to go with and edit down further. And currently there's not a feedback loop built in ChatGPT for that, unless the person happens to stay within the environment, which they probably aren't going to do.
Yeah, it makes sense. Interesting. So you mentioned Jasper AI. Any other AI tools for creating content that you've come across that you've any thoughts on those?
I haven't even used the image generator yet. That one, that one creeps me out almost more than the writing. I think it is interesting though, that when we think about what AI can do, people have almost always thought the first thing it would replace is like blue collar work or highly repetitive manual labor, and that it actually the makers of this software kind of went the opposite direction and went with like the creative jobs first: programming, writing, art, design.
So fascinating. I've thought about the same thing, and I know a lot of people have brought this idea up of we were expecting it to be, and it has obviously automated a lot of other things outside of the creative jobs, but I wasn't expecting it to be this robust so quickly. And it's still not perfect. I think you still need a human element to it. I have it. I'm currently using it to take our basically help create a blog post from this podcast episode. So from this podcast episode, I'll listen to it, create like 5 to 10 points, and then I'll give it a ChatGPT to then create a blog post. And I did that most recently. And, once again, you had some tweaking, but that was my aha moment. It was like last Friday when I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually an almost similar usage that you're using it for. And almost to summarize, or I have an idea in some way and I have a creative, perspective on something, and then to fill in the blanks and help me do the heavy lifting. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on the rest of kind of I guess maybe looking back at your career, and if you were just starting out in either in the SaaS world or whatnot, how would you look at your own personal career development and areas that you'd want to focus in to leverage AI, but then also focus on the skills that you don't think are going to be replaced by AI? Any thoughts there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not somebody who would bet against AI. I think that when you hear people saying, well, it's not that good or it's limited in this way or that way, like I've at least been around long enough that I remember people talking about the internet that way or mobile devices that way. And so technology is always moving forward. And I think that if you've got a really just kind of watershed moment, and we now are at the point where we experience that like every 5 years or so, there's sort of this technological breakthrough that we go, wow, this changes everything. Like experienced it with the iPhone, experienced it with the internet, to some blockchain. There is these sort of foundation, like aha moments with technology that, it always starts very basic and very like limited use case and just kind of nerdy, and not a lot of people use it and it's not that useful, but of course it gets better and better over time. So I've seen that enough now in my life that I just wouldn't bet against AI. I think that it will be it'll be just like the internet is for us today, like just part of everyday life. You don't even really think about it, and you can't even imagine a time when you didn't have this technology. I don't necessarily think it's going to enslave humanity or do anything that people are really worried about. I think probably the worst thing is it will make it'll make a lot of interactions very transactional, because we'll know we're dealing with robots. It'll be more rare to deal with a human, say in a chat conversation or customer service or sales. And I think we'll appreciate the times that we do get to deal with humans more. And I also think that the artifacts that AI creates, there will always be some kind of a divide between what a human can do and what the robots can do, in the same way that I've got guitars here on my wall that people can't see. But, there's things that are made by humans that we know are made by humans, and they inherently have more value because they are. Things that are factory produced are faster and cheaper and more efficient, but we also know that, if you can get it handmade, it's handcrafted. It may even have flaws in it, but it's going to be more valuable. And I just think that's the way AI is going to go.
I appreciate that. And I think with, that was another topic that came up at the lunch table yesterday, was that idea of that almost exclusivity or that rareness, and that, even with the flaws, right? It's like, I'm the only one that has this, and it's unique. And I think from go-to-market functions in my own career, and looking at my own development of how can I create those unique experiences that no one else can, right? If I'm an AE and a sales rep, like how can I build a relationship with somebody that AI, really can't do now, and probably not anywhere near the near future. And as a marketer, right, how do I look at ultimately, how do I create amazing experiences that are unique and special that no one else is doing, and differentiate too. I think that's the other thing. Like a lot of people, at the end of the day, whatever you're looking at, how can you be different, and either using AI or not using AI to differentiate yourself in the market.
Well, there's a lot of generic stuff anyway, right? And I think that the biggest thing that ChatGPT, the first, line of business it's going to kill off is all of the content agencies that are out there that spit out, really garbage content just to keep a blog calendar full, and I'm not disparaging against any one of these groups in particular, but I mean, so much content out there is check the box content that doesn't add any real value, that regurgitates, everything else. That essentially a writer has been given like 10 minutes to write or something to make it profitable, and they have to go and like scour the internet and pull a bunch of research, and then they spit out like top 10 ways to do X, Y, and Z. And I think that there are agencies out there that could continue to exist because people want their blog calendar full and they want to feed the search engines new content, but it's not good content. And I just think AI is it's the first, real sub industry that it will destroy. And maybe it should. Yeah.
Interesting perspective. And I think if anybody is working for one of those organizations, or maybe even is in a role like that, because I actually did a very similar thing when I was looking at creating a blog post for these episodes. I went on Upwork and I was like, hey, can I get some help, creating these blog posts? And I was like, okay, that's going to cost too much, or it's going to take too much work, or they need to be experts in this field. And so I was like, I'm either going to do it myself. And so I started doing it myself. And I was like, okay, how do I add ChatGPT? Because to your point, if you're just going to create generic stuff, you're going to be replaced either by somebody that does something better or by automation. And I love that. Super cool. Well, Kyle, I want to have you back on because I'd love to talk about product market fit. So maybe we can have you back on and how folks can get there and how SaaS leaders can get there, because I think that'd be really relevant to our audience. We are out of time. How can folks find you online?
If they want to check out my personal website's KyleRacki.com. That's RACKI. And that's where I talk about like product market fit and founder stuff. People can sign up to the newsletter where I send a new article every Saturday that is not written by a robot. And if they want to check out my SaaS company, it's Proposify. So for anybody who sends proposals, especially larger sales teams, Proposify is the tool that helps get really sales leaders more control and visibility into their proposal process.
Super cool, Kyle. Thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate our conversation, and talk to you soon.
Thanks, Taylor. Appreciate it.